What is going on, everybody? It is Sunday night, December 4th. We are officially 4 days into the last month of 2022. Somehow, I can't believe that we've actually made it this far. These last 4 months have been a blur. I am, once again, Dom the Movie Nerd, and I am joined by a very old friend of mine. Again, I would argue probably the person who I've known the longest when it comes to, my cinephile side. As you guys will know, he hosted the 9-part Succession Season 3 recap series with me in the fall. He's been on a couple episodes so far this year, including The Boys Season 3 podcast episode that we did back in June. Dustin, the Duster Mason, my old movie trivia teammate. How's it going, man? Happy to have you back on.
I'm doing okay. I'm waiting to talk about the 2022 movie wrap up, and
Yes.
we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we do. Sure. Yeah, we do. Absolutely, we do. I'll say that 2022 is reminding me a lot in a strange way of some previous years that we've experienced. So we'll get into that more on the show once we've actually gotten started. Sure. Talking TV. All right. What is up, Dustin? How have you been, man? It has been a minute since you've been on the show.
The same. I'm all right.
Just all right. Come on. You got to give me a little bit something more than that to work with.
All right.
All right. Even that's something. Okay. It's
all right.
Yeah. Done before. Yeah. No. So Dustin's back. Dustin's been like my ride or die on a lot of things. We've known each other a very, very long time. He's been on the show before, but I like to think that he's like kind of almost sort of started to become a little bit of a member of the Talkin TV family here.
We've been on enough episodes.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. I'm telling you, that Venom 2 Many Saints of Newark episode was a special episode for us back in the fall, back in September of 2021. God, that hard to believe that was actually a year ago. That's mindful, right? It kind of is. Well, only because, so you know how with different years, the way that they pass you by, some years can feel a little bit longer and others feel like they go by in a blink of an eye. Like, I know I'm not the only one that experiences that. That's definitely
for sure.
Yeah. So this has been one of those years where it's like, there were parts of it that dragged, I will admit, kind of the first half, and then transitioning into the summer felt like a little bit of a drag. But I don't know about you. These last 4 months have been a blur. And I don't know if it's just because of the recent changes that have gone on in my life, or if it's just that we finally got good movies back, kind of finally for the first time.
There's been a good streak.
It has been. It's been
for the last couple months. There's been a good little streak.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that because I don't know, so 2020, obviously, we have the pandemic and everything's shut down. We have no movies. We have to take whatever we can get. Most of them are direct-to-streaming hits. Nolan tries to be the one guy to break through once theaters kind of sort of open over the summer. He's like, come see my movie. We did. We saw it together. We saw Tenet together. We drove to Danbury because it was not Danbury, Connecticut is not that far from where we live. It was about a half-hour drive. We went. We saw it. We had a blast. It was a great time. I actually retroactively put Tenet in my top 10 from 2020. Just because, again, that movie accomplished, I think, exactly what it set out to do. But for the most part, people stayed home. And then famously, at the end of 2020, HBO, as part of their initiative in order to drive subscribers toward their newly announced HBO Max streaming platform, made the controversial decision to drop all of their theatrical movies that were planning on coming out that year simultaneously on their streaming platform. Say which will, I think that was kind of a success for this kind of weird hybrid state that we were in. But ultimately, the industry, I think, was not a fan of it. And then we come out of 2021 and coming into 2022, and Wall Street just straight up turns on Hollywood. All of a sudden, all this money that was being poured into streaming just seems to take a big turn back. Hollywood really is not sure whether or not to keep investing in streaming or whether to start putting movies out in theaters. There are a few hits, but for the most part, it's still record-breakingly low box office numbers. But then Top Gun happens, and people are like, oh, okay, we should put more movies in theaters. But then a weird thing happened this past summer where Top Gun was apparently so big and popular that no other big movies. I swear to God, after Top Gun came out, there were 4 other movies that came out in theaters, and that was it. It was Thor, Nope, Bullet Train, and one other that I'm already forgetting. It felt like...
Oh, Where the Crawdads Sing.
Yeah, right? That movie, out of nowhere, becomes a huge hit. How did that happen?
I think old people saw it.
It's got to be. It's got to be. They're there's always that one movie that comes out every summer that hits all the demographics that most.
Isn't that a mystery? It's a mystery, honey. Who's in it? I don't care.
I remember that. I feel like the biggest draw. It's Reese Witherspoon's name was attached, so everybody assumed that she was going to be in the trailer. Which I'm okay. First off, I didn't realize Reese Witherspoon was still that big of a draw for movies. And second of all, like, but the funny thing being that she was not actually in the movie. She's a producer.
Yeah, she's a producer.
But I feel like the biggest draw for that is the Taylor Swift song. Like, and how crazy is that? Where it's like a pop star being attached to movies. Like, I'm still convinced that, like, even though Don't Worry Darling bombed, I'm still convinced that, like,
so did Amsterdam.
Yeah, well, Amsterdam is a different story because, like, I feel like that movie, it's like,
you said Taylor.
Well, the David O. Russell thing just kind of outstretched everything,
sure.
you know. And then
that was good. We were talking about that like weeks ago, where it's like that movie was gonna get review bombed regardless. And while it's not his best movie, we could talk about that movie if you want later in the video, but like, I don't mind it. It's not among his best.
Kind of harmless, like, especially considered to, like, I know you and I disagree heavily on American Hustle, but we're both kind of on this and Joy. Like, I think we could both, for the most part, agree on this movie. It's not his best work, but it's also kind of harmless and not at all. It immediately fell into that slot of, it's like, okay, I'm not gonna go that hard on this movie because of it's already being review bombed solely based on the director's reputation. You know, it comes out of like that weird phenomenon that we have now of like people not being able to separate the artists' individual personalities from the art that they produce. It's like, I know that's talked about a lot,
actions,
right? But it's talked about a lot, but it really is one of those things that is taking precedence above all else. Like, I was literally having a conversation with Chris about this earlier, and it's like, people have just become unable to separate their own like personal vendettas. Like, I'm still having arguments with people about Chris Pratt. It's like, who gives a shit about Chris Pratt, honestly?
That's not even an argument, really.
Like,
where it's just like, there's nothing you can bring up about Chris Pratt that he's ever done that's really that controversial.
Yeah.
It's people dissecting things. He's never said anything
really
outwardly
reading hard into stuff that is not at all confirmed.
Like, they act like he says gay marriage shouldn't exist.
Right.
Like, he never said that.
No, nothing of the sort.
They act like he's that kind of a person.
Yeah.
He's not like Kanye, who literally just came out and said Nazis are good.
Right. Which is like, okay, he's lost. He's a lost cause at this point. Yeah.
He needs complete and utter help and medication.
Just shut off from the world as well.
For sure.
Like, it's
disappointing to see.
It's like, I don't even know if it's like past the point of like just doing it for attention's sake. Like, this is like, feels like a whole new level.
It is in his case at this point, because he has no other option but to like pivot to that crowd for some reason, but he has no intelligence for that kind of material. So he's just talking out of his ass. It's like if you or I were talking about that.
Yeah, it's like, well, in fairness though, I don't think that's giving us enough credit, because I feel like we would be able to.
For sure, we wouldn't go on a rate. We wouldn't like bait people and be like, "Hey, Hitler was all right."
Well, not
right?
even just that. It's like just be able to like. The problem is that, again,
Nuts.
It would be one thing if he was able to intelligently back up anything that he says. But again, it's like most celebrities, they're not. You know, where it's like, I'd like to think that we're, for the most part, educated on this stuff. You know, our high school, even though it was a public school, was like, I think, better than most, and I'd still like to think that we learned a decent amount about, like, you know, the differences between, you know, just morally right and wrong. You know, I'd like to think that, but
I like to think everyone knows the
you would think, but you know,
right and wrong.
You see, you would think, but again, just given how skewed social media has made everything, you know, it's unfortunately become one of those things that it's like, it might not seem as obvious.
Yeah, but there's been this like revolution in film criticism specifically that I guess I pay attention to that more than the regular person because I have no life, but it's become very apparent, like you're saying, like no one can separate the art from the artist. It's really about the past actions of anything, or the alleged past actions of anybody or any filmmaker or actor. So you have to dismiss it despite the quality. Like, people just boggle my mind. And when it comes to the Louis C.K. movie that came out, and he released on his own site, and it got pretty good reviews. The people that saw it didn't mind it, but all the reviews, if you read them, are about his scandal and not about the movie.
Of course.
Really. And they barely talk about the movie. They just really dismiss it, and it doesn't even seem like they saw it.
Right.
Really.
Well, because they probably didn't. That's the sad part. They probably didn't even watch it.
Well, that's just fucking fraud right there.
Literally.
They shouldn't even be allowed to write reviews if they just write reviews about shit they don't see. That's insane to me. But like, other than
given
that,
the amount of critics in that high position that don't actually watch the stuff they're supposed to review, it's like,
or even they don't. Here's the thing: critics don't have to review whatever they don't want to. They really don't need to.
Right.
I mean, like, you can make the excuse for like, oh, well, my employer said I have to. No, you don't have to review a movie if you really feel that hardly about like David O. Russell or Woody Allen or any of these people.
Right. But
or Brad Pitt.
It's contributing to the social media gossip column. That's all it is. It's contributing to try and be relevant in the face of like proposed, like morally justified outrage, which is what drives seemingly every bit of action now that we have to deal with. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. It would be one thing if this was a justified cause, but I think everyone has kind of started to realize the scam that it actually is. The unfortunate thing is that there's still way too many people buying into it. But at the very least, I think that if there's one thing that people have started to vocalize a little bit more, and it's not being vocalized yet, but definitely
everyone vocalizes it, but except about Tom Cruise, who
except about Tom
movie.
Cruise, right?
Yeah,
exactly. That's the irony. That's the irony.
Biggest star in the world has the most closets and most skeletons.
More skeletons in his closet than I can count. He's like the last one, and it's like what's I think that because once he's
more,
open,
but like
but because
like
once his
Matt Damon did kind of get semi-canceled
a little bit, but
a little bit, but like not really,
not
but
really.
Yeah. But he got screwed. He got shit on for something.
Yeah, but it's like once the doors open, it's like the floodgates are just gonna
for sticking up for Louis C.K. That's what he got in trouble for.
Who, Matt Damon?
Yeah, that's what.
I thought it was the Minnie Driver thing.
What Minnie Driver? There's so many fucking things.
I know it's hard to get track of. No, I thought that
it was Minnie Driver.
Minnie Driver like basically called him out for trying to like explain how like not every male was like a piece of shit for not buying into cancel culture, and then like he ended up like basically coming out and apologizing.
Oh,
that thing. It was like early on.
I think it was related to the Louis thing, though.
Okay.
Because he said he was just saying, yeah, what he did was wrong, but it doesn't make him a bad artist. He's a great, funny artist. Like,
right.
But beyond my point, Amsterdam was pretty good. And what else are we going to be talking about? Like, what does this year relate to the other 2 years?
Yeah, well, so the first topic is it's not just the last 2 years of COVID, which have obviously separated themselves from the last batch, but it's like I feel like you and I have been talking a lot about this really since I would say 2015, 2016, because like we were friends obviously from elementary school all the way throughout high school, and I would say later on in high school is when I really started to like watch movies seriously, in the way that kind of you guys had all the way through high school. But 2014, 2015 when I would say I started to take this seriously. But I feel like around 2016, I don't know if it was like right when it started, but like around the halfway point, I feel like that's when movies started to take a dip, and we started to kind of move towards this place where we're at now with movies again. This again, very over emotionally motivated, very kind of failing to acknowledge anything actually having to pertain to the story or the actual context of the movie, and just kind of almost trying to create this narrative around everything to the point where it even affects the art itself, to the point where it doesn't even feel like it. A lot of it has to do with the Marvelization of it. A lot of it has to do with the over franchiseification of it. A lot of it has to do with, again, the infection of for lack of a better word, social justice movements, but to a point where it doesn't even actually help intrigue or inflate. These things are supposed to be about entertainment, and the fact that a majority of them have almost become like glorified public campaign messages that don't even feel genuine about the messages that they're claiming to pertain to. Like that's ultimately kind of what it has become down to. And now some years have been better than others. I feel like 2019 in particular was a year that really stood out amongst. But I wanted your take on kind of where 2022 as a year has stacked up against the previous 6 years since 2016, right? And like I don't know if you like want to do like a breakdown of each year, but like 2022, kind of my take on it has been like the year since we've come out of COVID. There's been kind of a reemergence into theaters, and also kind of almost like finally like a little bit of an outcry against like every movie feeling like just a chore to watch, and we're finally starting to get like some good, decent entertainment.
I'll say this about 2016 and 2022 to start. 2016, at least in my opinion, has two of the last, like, of the five last really good, solid, actually three, but two that were in my top 10 of studio comedies, which were Keanu and Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping. And this year does not have
any
a really great studio like a broad,
maybe Bros is like the closest one I can think of, but
even that is more so of a romantic comedy than
exactly.
It fits more in the train wreck mold than the knocked up mold, or like Forgetting Sarah Marshall mold. But maybe that's just me. But you know what I mean, like a straight up laugh a minute comedy that's all about the laughs. And 2016 had also it wasn't exciting of a year in my opinion, because Moonlight was like straight away no pun
Like,
intended, the best
it's
fucking
like
movie of the year.
that movie was like winning from the minute that I remember when you sent me the trailer because I couldn't remember what it was for a minute when you told me about it, and then I watched the trailer. I'm like, oh, this is going to be the best movie of the year, no question.
Yeah, it's great, and I have no faults with that film. It's really wonderful, and it's really the last like terrific and truly deserving Best Picture winner.
I
So,
agree. I agree with that. Like, I've
no,
even come around on Parasite. I've come around. I don't think it deserved to win over Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
no, it didn't.
It,
It was a very good movie, but it didn't
it took me
deserve
a
it over
while.
Once
I'll
Upon a
admit it was
Time in Hollywood.
because the movie was actually really good. But like in hindsight, it's really come around. It's like, yeah, it shouldn't have won over Hollywood. Like, at
No,
all.
that was all about the hype and like
Right.
representation. Sorry to be, yeah, it was all because that's not even Bong Joon-ho's best movie,
Right.
But like, again, that maybe that's just me, but they were really pushing the narrative just in the year where Tarantino could have easily won in any other year for director and picture for that film. It's ridiculous to me. But and screenplay also, which I think the third act in that movie has a better third act than Parasite,
Oh yeah.
which are similar in a way because they both take turns. But Once Upon a Time in Hollywood stays more true to the tone that it's set up in the first two acts. So yeah, moving on to 2017 then, from
Mhm.
2016. That was another like frustrating, not as consistently good year, but at least we got I, Tanya and Good Time. Those are
Yeah,
the two instant classics from that year for
I
me.
agree with that.
But there's a lot of great
I would,
movies from
in
that year.
hindsight, I would throw Get Out and Logan in with them as well. I
Know what
would
else
throw
I
the-
would?
Which
Lego
one?
Batman movie.
Yeah,
which
you know
we
what?
saw.
You're right. You're right. You're
That's
goddamn
a-
right. Yeah, that was what we saw that one together. That was a
That's
great time.
Really the last great, amazing animated movie that I've seen. I don't think there's been a better one since. Even as good as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was.
Well,
I love that.
I'm like, so you put Batman over Spider-Verse.
Yeah, I would.
That's,
Lego Batman
wow,
over.
That's
Yep,
that's a hot take. That is a
funnier
hot
movie.
take right
I think
there.
it's a funnier movie. Yeah.
I'll give you Lego Batman is funnier. I'll give you that.
And you could argue the animation, but I do think it's a better movie, and I think it's a better rewatch too. But again, maybe it's just me. 2018.
Yeah.
That's
That's when the
worst-
writing was
that's-
really on the wall, I feel
That's the worst year since now, I would say. 2018 was like it has some bangers like Game
Yes.
Night, mid 90s, Vox Lux. There's some great terrific films from that year. But
I throw
no.
Bad Times at the El Royale in there as well.
I got to rewatch that, but that did not
I'm telling you, that one
I'm not in love with that movie.
The
I
third
like
act
it.
is still troublesome, but the first two acts are bangers. Of like,
Maybe
like
I'll
still,
rewatch that
like
after we
so
talk.
much better than anything I could have possibly expected.
But I was expecting a little bit funnier and a little bit more kooky and like a little more evenly written film, but the way it unweaves was a little unsettling to me at first. But maybe after a rewatch, because I did rewatch it a couple years after it came out, but I think it's due for another one. 2019 is where it definitely started to, go back on track, but it didn't start out very good that year
it didn't.
at all. And that was another year, like I said, besides Parasite, there were so many overhyped movies from that year. It's annoying, like Booksmart, Jojo Rabbit.
Oh, you know I'm going to disagree with you on JoJo. Booksmart, I like Booksmart. I do. I mean,
I like
weird.
it too, but it's not fucking
It's
amazing.
weird because it's like, is that movie overhyped? I don't know.
For
because I feel
sure
like,
it is.
Well, because I
The
feel
way
like
it was, it was.
because
If you compare it to Superbad, you're expecting it to be as funny as Superbad,
but
and it's not on that level.
that's what I want to
confidently just are like, oh, it's better and it's less sexist, and it's like, whatever.
But here's what I want to focus on, because I feel like now what's weird about that is I feel like your take on that has become the mainstream take, where almost everybody remembers that movie now for being the Superbad ripoff, and now with Don't Worry Darling, it's like Olivia Wilde's already got even more like kind of negative.
She just
like
fucked
kind of
herself
negative
over
attention
with that. And that was a shitty movie. And to be honest with you, I don't even want to make fun of that movie because it does a good job of making fun of itself, to be honest with you. And it doesn't even realize it's doing that. And that's what makes it even worse. If it played it like more tongue in cheek, which Olivia Wilde is going to claim she was doing the whole time a few years from now, like she is absolutely going to be like,
she's going to pull a Shyamalan with The Happening, where she's like, oh yeah, this is totally what I meant to do with this the whole time. And it's like, no, you weren't.
Shyamalan. That's interesting you compare it to Shyamalan, because I think Shyamalan has an easier way of getting away with that, especially the time. because before he had weird fucking movies before The Happening. Lady in the Water was the movie that came right before The Happening. And that's even more maligned in some areas of people.
True.
So that's one I didn't even watch because it sounded even
Oh,
dumber than
Lady in the Water.
Happening.
I watched it last year during my Shyamalan binge. That is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
But
I can't explain that movie.
Back to Olivia Wilde, though. She was, did a pretty good job with Booksmart, but when it came to Don't Worry, Darling, she's going to claim that it was a tongue-in-cheek sort of like camp classic she was going for, but there's no irony involved, and it deserved that, and Florence Pugh deserved it too, because she was amazing in the movie. She's the only one bright, shining spot about it besides the cinematography.
Almost to the point where she like carries the movie,
She absolutely carries the movie. And Harry Styles is dreadfully miscast. It's almost like sad, like talking about that performance, because it's just so mediocre and like just wrong in a lot of ways. And the way they try to cover up his British accent. But going back to 2019, Booksmart was overrated and Uncut Gems deserved an Oscar campaign.
Yes, 100%. I think everybody who watched that movie agreed on that. But again, it was like what was it? That
apparently the Academy member.
Yeah, I was about to say that article for that one Academy member that was like, oh, Jennifer Lopez is too big and mainstream. Eddie Murphy, Adam Sandler, they're too mainstream. They're comedy stars. They don't deserve Oscars. And it's like, well, fuck you then. Good Lord.
Yeah, and it makes me think more so where it's like, oh, if one person has actually the confidence and balls to say that in a publication, what makes me think that there aren't other Academy members like that with that same mentality? Because, like, it takes more than one to just snub Adam Sandler like that, or James Franco for The Disaster Artist. So it's like, Uncut Gems and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and quite honestly, The Beach Bum are really the only three masterpieces, the last three masterpieces of the decade, with some other great films as well, like Dragged Across Concrete from S. Craig Zoller. And, Joker was great, in my opinion. I love Todd Phillips, and I think he's a very good director. I know you did not like that movie.
I am not a fan of Joker.
But it's not the worst movie of the decade, like some people would say, like Kevin Cookman. But,
Just throwing out names.
Yeah, because it's like one of the worst YouTube videos I've ever seen. But anyway, 2019 was just filled with a lot of disappointments, a lot of solid stuff. There's a few overhyped movies, like I said. Booksmart, Parasite, Marriage Story was not as great as it should have been, in my opinion.
Agree.
But it was still good. What else am I missing from that year?
Richard Jewell.
That's the most random movie you could like. Out of the awards ones.
There's a funny story that goes into that one, because that's one that famously I had to watch twice because I fell asleep during it. Then I rewatched it. I'm like, wow, this might be the best Clint Eastwood movie in years. What the hell?
It's one of the best ones.
And it might solely be because of Paul Walter Hauser, which is even the funniest part, who now just guest stars on Cobra Kai just when he wants to.
And
Sam Rockwell. And Sam Rockwell, of course. How could I forget?
You were going to say Kathy Bates.
I was going to say Kathy Bates, who somehow got an Oscar nomination for that. Makes no sense. But anyways,
it's not one of the weirder ones, but
but just for that year. So moving on to 2020 then. Again, COVID year of no movies.
Yeah, not a great year. My favorite movie that year was The King of Staten Island. So that tells you something, folks. The Trial of the Chicago 7 was my second favorite of that year, followed by Promising Young Woman, which was a promising young directorial debut.
Stop. Okay? Come on.
So
you've done better puns than that.
No, but it was good. I was not supposed to be. Unlike Promising Young Woman, which was a very good debut.
Oh my God.
And yeah, those are the really three standout movies from that year.
And then and then the last year, 2021, which it's like, were there any like memorable movies that came out of that year other than the Oscar slap, which is weird because that wasn't even. I feel like everyone associates that with 2021, and that was this year. And that was this year. Hey man,
and it's not a movie.
That shit was straight up cinematic. I don't know what you're talking about. Listen, it was caught on camera. That shit was probably more watched than any other movie. Nah, probably more like a glorified TikTok. I don't know. I don't know.
Argument about most viral videos.
Yeah, true.
No,
that one had a special place though.
Oh, dude, the Will Smith slap is more people saw that than The Godfather.
Listen, there was one. Listen, there was.
I guess you're right.
There was one TikTok. There was one TikTok where they swapped out Will Smith and Chris Rock for their respective DreamWorks.
Oh yeah, that was good.
That was great.
Yeah, that was really good.
It was Will Smith, this fucking Oscar, the Shark Slayer, coming in and slapping Marty the Zebra from Bad Guys. I cried during that one.
2021. I'd say is like slightly better, but it's pretty much the identical year as 2020, in my opinion.
In some
And
ways, yes. I think the
Don't Look
HBO
Up
Max,
was a very good movie, and I
the,
still think that's
yeah.
probably the best film that's come
I
out
think
this
the HBO
decade so far.
Max, my big takeaway from 2021 is the HBO Max day and date drop saved that one, because I feel like if not for that, it would have, I agree, been a direct repeat where it's like
Which
the
movie?
occasional thing. No, the all the HBO Max drops, like that came out, even though
Oh,
they all bombed at theaters. It's like they all got
most of them bombed.
most of them bombed in theaters, yes, but a few of them got like some attention, like Godzilla
You know
vs.
what
Kong,
didn't
Mortal
bomb?
Kombat.
Tom
What?
and Jerry.
Tom and Jerry somehow. I remember when we were going through like all the HBO Max drops, and you were like, bomb, bomb, bomb. Tom and Jerry. You're like, oh, that one made money somehow.
Chloe, man, she's a
Yeah.
movie star.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Which it's like, and now she's in The Peripheral, which can be streamed right for now for free on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, that's gonna be in my peripheral.
So here we are at 2022, and like I said, the way that I would break it down is the first third of this. 2022 was like the closest to like a regular movie year that we've had, like the first real movie year since 2019. And even though like it is picking itself up on track, I think the only big difference between this year and those previous couple of years is that this is the first year where we really had no like movie summer. Like I feel like we had a regular May, with Multiverse of Madness. I feel like
It was
Men
a Top
had
Gun
brief
fever,
moment.
baby.
But Top Gun, just once that came out, that just took over the whole summer. And it's like, I don't know what happened. Because like I vaguely remember watching other movies.
Top Gun saved cinema, bro.
It's like, what? How? Like, explain this to me. Because like I've been trying to rationalize it over and over in my head. But like, no, but that's the thing is it's like, you got to look, it's the same thing as whenever you have a monster phenomenon. You have to look not just at the money, you have to look at who's paying for the movie. And the truth is that just everyone went to watch this. And I'm like, are that many people still just like willing to throw in this much money to watch Tom Cruise literally remake a movie that is already made? This is not even like he's making like a new Mission Impossible, which at least it's like, okay, those have new stunts and new locations and shit that they bring into each one of those movies, even if the plot's the same every time, Like,
all right.
that's the movie.
I think the Church of Scientology has something to do with the success of this movie. I
mean, so we're going there now.
Yeah, I'm going conspiracy theory because I'm sick of Tom Cruise getting all the, leeway.
It's weird.
He's annoying. He's a great actor and everything, but it's annoying. And the Church of Scientology are just notoriously sketchy people.
I think the only thing you and I are going to disagree on here is him being a great actor, because I still have yet to be convinced that he's a great actor. Outside of a few movies that I have seen him in, outside of like 3 or 4 movies that I've seen him in, I am not convinced that Tom Cruise is a great actor.
Color of Money, Rain Man, Jerry Maguire,
haven't seen it,
Born
haven't
on the
seen
4th
it,
of
haven't
July,
seen it, haven't
Collateral, Tropic Thunder.
I'll give you Collateral, I'll give you Tropic Thunder. I'll give you Collateral, I'll give you Tropic Thunder, and I give you Magnolia and Eyes Wide Shut. I give you those
Magnolia.
4.
Yeah, I wasn't even done.
I give you those. I give you those 4, and that's it, really.
I would even put Night and Day on that list.
I'll throw The Firm. The Firm was fun. The Firm is a fun movie. It was so stupid, that movie.
He's good in Few Good Men too.
I've not seen it. I've not seen it. Yeah.
You've seen The Firm, but not A Few Good Men?
Yes, I've seen The Firm, but not A Few Good Men, because The Firm seemed fun.
Okay.
I like fun movies.
You can't handle the truth, apparently.
Apparently, no. I like fun movies. What can I say?
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm not sure. I watched one other. I watched The Outsiders. I watched that.
That's not a Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah, he's in it. He's in it.
He barely is.
I know. But anyway, so moving on. So weirdly enough, it felt like Top Gun again had taken over the whole year, and then the fall comes. And for better or for worse, I will say that Don't Worry, Darling did at least like kind of spark this like new shot, because all of a sudden it's like we're getting movie after movie after movie after movie. And I did want to respond to Derpy5 first comment. It's the only comment on this video so far, saying that The Batman is the best film of 2022, maybe, besides what comes out in like 11 days. And here's what I'll
Very good movie. Yeah.
No, well, you go first.
All right, I'll just sum it up this way. I'm glad Derby brought this up, or whatever his name was. The Batman is my 5th favorite film of the year so far. Still,
yeah,
it's December 4th.
Yes,
that movie came out months ago.
Yeah, the movie is still in my top 10. Now, will it stay there? I don't know. There's a few more movies that I still have to see from this year, but I think
this was 2012, it would be like my 18th favorite movie of the year.
I agree. It's like, because what I'll say about the movie is the movie, as good as it is, I have found it hard to rewatch. Unfortunately, I have. Yeah. I think the length brings it down, and I think that the nature of it kind of for lack of a better word, the personality of it makes it have this kind of sameness across the length of the 3 hours that I feel like the Nolan movies never felt guilty to.
Yeah.
You know, maybe just because of the take and the approach to it. It's not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. The performances are still great, but it's one of those ones where, like you said, any other year, this would be like 18th or 19th at best. And this year, it will most surely make the top 10.
I don't think it's a bad thing that it's not as rewatchable as the Nolan movies because it's its own beast entirely. Like it's more 70s influence than the Nolan movies were, where the Nolan movies are more influenced by 90s Michael Mann more than anything.
Yeah.
At least the latter two were.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. So we would, like I said, we've been on a winning streak these past couple months, though, because fall of 2022, I think very similarly to fall 2016, came to play with a lot of these movies because in a row we had movies like Don't Worry Darling, Banshees of Inisherin, Tar, The Menu, Bones and All, The Fablemans, for which for better or for worse is getting a lot of attention and a lot of approach. There's more than I'm missing. Armageddon Time had a brief moment. Till had a brief moment. You know, a couple stinkers found their way in there. You know, that She Said movie, which is like, I don't even think the only thing that's going to get is like maybe a Best Supporting Actress nomination. You know, Elvis, that was the other one. I was trying to remember what the other big movie from the summer was. Elvis got massive. Like some people were predicting that was going to be a flop and ended up being a huge success. So I'm like, okay, so the Bohemian Rhapsody curse lives on. Good to know. And now that movie is potentially going to be up for a couple of Oscars. We're going to talk about that when we get to that later on. So we also have a couple, like I said, we still have a few movies that we have yet to see. I have not seen Glass Onion yet. I was waiting for that to drop on Netflix. I have a rule when it comes to Netflix movies that I've only broken once. Avatar, The Way of Water still has yet to come out. The Whale, I still have yet to see. Pinocchio, Bardo, all the rest of the White Noise, all the rest of the Netflix movies. But what's it called? Oh, and also probably the biggest surprise for me so far, and I feel like it's kind of sad that this isn't being talked about enough more because they're just talking about the movie's box office. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. I think we could both agree. Well, I don't agree with you that it's better than the first one. Surprisingly, somehow pulled off a miracle and was a fantastic movie, I think.
Very good movie.
Much better than than the other two Marvel movies this year. Multiverse of Madness and Love and Thunder, which while I did not dislike those movies as much as I disliked a lot of the Marvel efforts put forth in 2021. I still felt that those movies, weirdly enough, suffered from a lot of the same problems, that it felt like the main character wasn't really the focus. It felt like it felt like the emphasis wasn't being put on the right parts, and it felt like the movie was stripped of a lot of important scenes and kind of cut down, and both movies were very, very rushed over, whereas that was not at all the case with Wakanda Forever.
Yeah, and you could also say this about the 2020s, about Marvel movies. After Endgame,
they really have gone downhill.
Like you love Spider-Man, you know,
No Way Home, but again, that was the
No Way Home. But
well, we've talked about that too.
I wouldn't call that a great movie.
Well, the other thing too also is, does that movie work without the nostalgia factor as well? Because you and I have also talked about it. No, not at all.
It's all reliant on that.
Yes, exactly. But what's interesting, like I said, Wakanda Forever is the first Marvel movie post Endgame. You're right, that proves okay, there might be a future of Marvel, but it's like, yeah, I mean, it was that thing that's like everyone was like, okay, Endgame is the biggest they're ever going to be. You know, they're never going to be able to top that. And obviously, again, it's like, okay, but the Marvel machine was still going. Now, granted, again, we have had Disney has been going through a lot of problems these last couple of years. The CEO change and then rechange, you know, the shuffling, you know, the invasion of the, you know, kind of woke politics and ideology kind of taking over. I wouldn't
call any of the films awful. I would only call She-Hulk awful.
Yes, I agree. She-Hulk is the only, I would say, bad product that they have put out so far since the turn of the 2020s. And like I said, I will say that for my money, at least, 2020, certain things coming out in 2023, other things I'm worried about, but certain things in 2023, I think look promising. I think Quantumania and Guardians of the Galaxy 3 both look promising. Secret Invasion, I think, looks like the best thing that they put out in years.
All of the films they put out have been like either mediocre to like mildly entertaining. And then Black Panther came out, and I'm like, this is a really solid, really good film. And I'm just like, the other, I did like Thor and Doctor Strange, the sequels, more than, you know, people are giving them credit for.
Yeah, and I would say, like I said, the thing I'll give both those movies is I like them both more than their predecessors. I am famously said in a controversial minute, I like Love and Thunder more than Ragnarok, and I like Multiverse of Madness more than the first Doctor Strange.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So let's get into some movies from 2022, some other movies, non-Marvel movies about 2022, because we talked about this. The first one that they have on the docket, The Menu, a movie that weirdly enough, I feel like not a lot of people are talking about, which is like every person that I've talked to who's seen this movie has loved it. This was a movie that when I saw it, I just could not get enough of it. You know, we know all about the troublesome history behind this movie, how it was originally going to be directed by Alexander Payne. It was a blacklisted script for years. Then Payne gets canceled, and I feel like the movie is shuffling it around. And then our guy, who has just been like putting out hit after hit recently, Adam McKay gets his hands on it. His production house handles it. You know, he gets a couple of the Succession. He gets one of the big directors off Succession, Mark Mylod, to direct it. And ultimately, like, this is one of my favorite movies of the year, man. Like this, I think the same can be said about you. Like, this movie is just like, it's everything that we've wanted from movies for a long time. It's deliciously dark. It's so like bitingly poignant with its satire, but not in like a tongue-in-cheek kind of a way. It's very like kind of on the nose about its caricatures that it's portraying, but it's also like not trying to like force it down our throats. Like it does still, like it's message motivated, but I think that like, oh, how do I phrase this? The not the horror aspects, because I wouldn't classify it as a horror movie, but like I don't know, like fill it in for me what it is that I'm trying to grasp at. Because
I think it's a dark comedic thriller, and I think it succeeds at everything it's going for, and it's a surreal movie too. At one point, it works as a bottle movie. It works as an all-in-one night movie, and everyone in the cast is great. Every single one. You could poke some holes in the third act. I would say there's a couple unnecessary scenes you could argue, but other than that, it's near as perfect as a movie has been for me personally this year, and that's saying something.
Yeah.
And Ray Fiennes, I absolutely think, deserves a Best Actor nomination.
I agree.
For that movie.
I agree.
Anya Taylor-Joy on a hot streak, and she is hot. And she's a really great actress. And
also the supporting cast too. Nicholas
Hoult is excellent.
John Leguizamo, late career comeback. Janet McTeer, Hong Chow.
Arturo Castro is another good comedic actor.
He really like proved himself in ways that I wasn't expecting. Reed Birney, again, continuing with his collaborations in all of McKay's things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I really enjoyed it. It has like the funniest. It is the funniest movie I think I've seen this year, but it's not like a broad comedy like a Dumb and Dumber or something. But it is funny in the way that like Succession is. But they take the Succession humor and like crank it to 11 and make it like Adult Swim-esque. And especially by the end, that ending is like one of the most surreal, crazy. You don't have to put too much thought into it.
Right.
You could poke holes and be like, why are they agreeing to do that? Like, what? Why is this? But just go with it. And it's just a magical experience. And it's a really dark, fucked up movie, but it's really well written.
It all
shot
makes
and
sense,
scored.
though, if you think
it
so.
all makes sense. Yeah,
like, throughout the entire time I was watching it, I couldn't help but think back to, I was listening to Rewatchables podcast on Glenn Ross, and I think the point that they brought up, I think that really stood out the most from that was when Ed Harris is talking about how kind of almost like the little guy always gets screwed. You know, you ultimately just end up working for these guys who don't appreciate you and ultimately just utilize your talent to benefit themselves. And so that's why when you figure out like what Ray Fiennes' thing is really all about, like this whole twisted night and experience and like every single grievance he has with every person in that room, it all made sense. And like
I'll say this. I think it works better as a darkly comic fable more than Banshees of Inisherin did. And it really didn't like come across that way until we are just talking about it right now. I just feel like it like works as like this crazy, like contained, like excluded from real life society story that it just works. It's like a horror story like Kendall Roy would like tell his kids as a bedtime story. Like that's what it felt like to me. And like it's just near perfect, like I said, and it just works better. It has like a better message, and it's consistently more funny than Banshees. But we'll get into Banshees in a little bit.
We'll talk about Banshees next.
Which I did like, but I like this way more, and I think Searchlight should give the campaign that they're giving to Banshees to this because it's making the money and people like it, and it deserves a screenplay nomination. The score by Colin Stetson is terrific. Like this movie deserves the buzz, and
absolutely. We'll talk about Banshees next. That's next on the docket. Although I do agree, I think that when it comes to the two movies, I did like this one a lot more. I had a lot more fun with this one. I just had a couple of moments that I wanted to record when Ray Fiennes reveals that the reason why he's brought John Leguizamo to the island being that on his one day off as a fry cook that he went to watch a really bad movie that John Leguizamo's actor character was in. That gave me some really, really hard laughs. It's like I have one day off, one good day off one day to enjoy myself and I wanted to see a good movie and you took that away from me. I was almost peeing myself with laughter. And I even wrote this down as the first line in the review because I think of all the great, incredible one-liners in this movie, I think that this one stood out the most. And I know I fucked up the name of the college, but I think one of my absolute favorite moments in this was, where did you go to school? Brown. Student loans? No, you're dying. I couldn't. I lost it at that. That was probably like line of the year. So with that being said, what would you have given? What would you have rated the menu out of 9.5 out of 10? For me, it's the same, 4.5 out of 5. It's like, it was like this close to being. I only have 3 movies above it for the year. Like, it's my number 4 overall of the year, and I don't see it changing at all. So next up, Banshees of Inisherin, Martin McDonagh's next film, 5 years after his last controversial Best Picture entry, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which, again, we talked about that when that came out back in 2017. This one, it's a lot far, far, far away from the United States South. It's set in Ireland, or rather an Ireland island off the coast of Ireland. Say that one 10 times fast.
Irish adjacent.
Exactly. Set in 1923, it reunites Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson from their In Bruges days, and this time features them as a pair of friends living on the island of Inisherin who are happily going about their lives until one day one of them decides to just stop being friends with them for reasons that are revealed throughout the film. Now, here's what I'll say. This movie was one that I enjoyed when I watched it, but it's one of those movies where it's like, I don't quite know how rewatchable it is. And kind of what it comes down to is ultimately the fact of what you were saying about how it might be a little bit deeper, a little bit almost too deep for people to like really enjoy, where it's like, I don't know if the stuff going on the surface, while it is extremely well acted and I think it is amazingly well put together, I love the way that the story unfolds as far as kind of ultimately trying to present this theme of prioritizing like certain human interactions over like putting your thought and effort towards this one thing that will ultimately be remembered greater and longer than you. I feel like Banshees is an entry in a couple of movies that came out this year. Nope, I would also throw in there as well, that are trying to make me make a statement on the role that art has in humans' lives and kind of where like priority for it comes from. I was watching the writers roundtable earlier this year that THR puts out every year, and that was something that they were talking about on there. And so I wanted your take on it, but also like kind of like, again, this is not like a super weighty movie per se. It's very jovial. It's very light. There are large parts of it where you're probably kind of wondering, like, what is even the point of watching this? Like, is there really anything going on here? Like, it's kind of just ultimately comes down to, okay, Brendan Gleeson's just going to cut off all of his fingers on his one hand, like, to his own detriment. Like,
it gets a little too fable-y and a little too like, and just the passage of time in the movie was very jarring. I was just feel like, what is the setting of this? Like, what is the time setting? Like, it's just the way it would, like, just the way characters would just keep making decisions and like be like, is it even the same day anymore? Like, what is going on? And like,
well, I mean, so that part I didn't have a problem with, because that I feel like is meant to contribute to the whole sleepy nature of, because again, it's a
like
very, very isolated town.
Yeah.
There's no real civilization. There's no real set. Like, I can only say this because I've lived in settings like that before, where it's like, again, this very rural nature, very feels like detached from society in the mainstream. There's no technology because of the time period that it's set in. So it's almost like the place has this feeling of no time passing and yet a bunch of time passing, where again, like in a weird way, like that's almost supposed to contribute to like almost like this mysterious aura, this curse that's hanging over the island. And like you have that one old woman who's almost supposed to be like this witch/prophet character who predicts this horrible ending that then happens to a character that you would least expect it, but meanwhile maybe
it was telegraphed though.
It was being telegraphed like throughout it. And I actually think that payoff, that being for the Barry Keoghan character, was actually really well. And there's parts of me that wonders if Barry Keoghan did give the best performance in the movie, even though he is not as being considered the way his other
better than Brendan Gleeson, I'd say.
I agree. I think Barry Keoghan was acting circles around Brendan Gleeson. Now, Colin Farrell is being marketed heavy for an Oscar nomination. This is another topic that kind of is going across a lot of people. There are a lot of people that are set to be nominated for Oscars this year that have never been nominated before, that have been working in Hollywood for a long time. Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, both chief among them. You know, Carrie Condon, who portrays Colin Farrell's sister in the movie, she has been known, amongst fans of like TV shows like Better Call Saul, and also, she has some voiceover parts in the Marvel movies. But this is like her first like major like awards groundbreaking role, But Colin Farrell has been a movie star forever. Brendan Gleeson has been a movie star even longer than him, and it's like there's something like kind of really interesting about those two getting nominated for the first time, along with a bunch of other stars across. Like this is Michelle Yeoh is set to get her first nomination. Brendan Fraser obviously is a big one. There's a couple of other ones. We'll talk about The Whale in a bit, but I think that even with the controversy aside, I think that Fraser is still a safe bet. Obviously a couple of new up-and-comers, obviously Austin Butler for Elvis, but it's like, I don't know if you had anything. Paul Dano was set to possibly get his first Oscar nomination for The Fabelmans, which
and he deserves it for the Batman.
Right. That's the craziest thing. It's like, so besides the 4 or 5 movies that he deserved to, it's like, okay, nothing for Little Miss Sunshine, nothing for Love and Mercy, nothing for
There Will Be Blood.
It's called nothing for Little Miss Sunshine, nothing for Love and Mercy, nothing for There Will Be Blood, none of those, but nothing for the Batman. Because that's even though we nominated
Heath
and
Ledger
gave the Oscar to Heath Ledger,
and Joaquin Phoenix.
Apparently it is only the actors who played the Joker that can get nominated unless they're Jared Leto,
And they nominated Black Panther for Best Picture.
Well, the Oscars have no idea what they're doing ultimately. But what's it called? So yeah. Ultimately, like, kind of what with the final take on Banshees, my thing is, it's like, it's good, but I don't know, weirdly enough, if I'm gonna rewatch it, because I feel like almost like in his attempt to like go so far back from, go the complete opposite route of Three Billboards felt like such like a movie that was like made for the time in which it came out. It like felt like it was covering all of these super important, weighty topics that felt very prevalent. This one again went the complete opposite direction.
It was his least accessible movie, I feel like, but it was still a solid, well-made movie. I just don't think it really sticks the landing as well as his other movies do.
Yes,
and it's not as consistently as funny, but I do think the performances carry it and his direction carries it. I just feel like it feels the most like a play more than any of his films.
Biggest thing for me that carried it through was Farrell and Gleason's performances in this movie. And the thing that I appreciated is how they didn't just make them feel like a carbon copy replica of their relationship and friendship that they had in Bruges. They felt like different characters. They felt like they had like a different friendship, a different, relationship with each other. And the thing that I thought was really funny was it almost felt like the relationship that I've had with like a couple of other friends in the past. Like it very, very much felt like in a weird way, like my old roommate. Like that sometimes there were points in that movie where, but like the conversation they would have would remind me of conversations that I had. I'm like, wait, what is going on? Like, is this another movie that is like probing into my mind and reading conversations? Like, what is happening here? So that was really my thoughts on it. Like I said, it's like I came away from Banshees. I didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to, but it's still in my top 10 for the year. But if I'm going to have to make some cuts going towards the end of the year, that will ultimately be one of them. So I only gave it a 4 out of 5 as opposed to a 4.5. That's where it came down to for me.
4.
What about you? Yeah. It's 4 out of 5?
Yeah.
All right. I feel like that's a good spot.
Next I give it like an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So moving on to Tar. Now, Tar, this is one of those movies where it's like, it sucks because this movie is so good. I think this is one of the best of the year. Ultimately, this is in my top 5. Like, honestly, if the top 5 that I have right now, which consists of Tar, The Menu, Bones and All, On the Count of 3, and Everything Everywhere All at Once, if that ends up being my final top 5 for the year, I will not be disappointed because Tar is, I think, just masterful on every level. Todd Field, which again, it's funny because you actually corrected me on this. Todd Field is somebody who I kept getting confused with Terry Zwigoff, or not Terry Zwigoff. Who was the other Todd that I kept getting him confused with? Or was it Terry Zwigoff?
I thought it was Terry Zwigoff.
Yeah, it was Terry Zwigoff because I thought that he directed Ghost World when he directed another movie in 2001, In the Bedroom, and then he directed 2006's Little Children, and this is the first movie that he has directed since then. And it's just it's a masterpiece on every single level. Like I don't even know how to describe this movie. It's like,
well, it's a character study about this really world renowned a composer played by Cate Blanchett, and she's like this really towering figure. She's very full of herself and she's pretentious, but she knows her shit and she's very talented. And through a bunch of like misunderstandings and maybe some comeuppance and tragedies also, she kind of gets canceled, and it's a kind of like a Me Too movie, and Todd Field directs it with a lot of patience and empathy and does a wonderful job directing it. I feel like it's a little bloated and a little long-winded, and I don't think it has all the answers. I don't think it's trying to have all the answers, but Cate Blanchett is amazing in the movie, and it's amongst her best work. I still think she's amazing in Blue Jasmine, and I think she's even more unlikable in that movie, as that character is even more unlikable than Lydia Tarr comes off in this movie. But maybe that's just me. But I really did like the movie. I like his other films more, Little Children, in particular. I love In the Bedroom too, but Little Children fucking awesome. And Jackie Earl Haley deserved a win for that, an Oscar win. But yeah,
Biggest
solid
thing
movie.
biggest thing for me, my take was this is the first Todd Field movie I'd ever seen. I'd never seen In the Bedroom or Little Children before. Biggest thing for me with the takeaway here is kind of in his kind of character portrayal. And I don't know if this is anything he has in common, but it almost feels like he's not trying to criticize, but look at kind of, these massive figures who like have gained their positions and kind of have all of this like kind of inherent ego and hoity-toityness, the way that they interact with them. Like they interact with people in a manner that makes you constantly aware of the fact that they prioritize themselves over all the people that they are in with the room that they are in. But like kind of what motivates that. And it's like, okay, so does kind of this assholish nature, does the ego justify, or rather does the talent justify the ego kind of, and then kind of almost the consequences that erupt as a result of that. It feels like it's trying to go so much further below the surface than just I guess like kind of the Me Too criticism, although I think it is a brilliant portrayal of a character that I feel like would be canceled in the Me Too movement, because the thing that I've noticed and the thing that I've talked about is a lot of the people who come under fire, not all, but a lot of the people who come under fire in this era are the people who typically possess a higher than normal intelligence, a higher than average intelligence, people who, again, are prioritized as having a greater understanding of the human conditions that maybe people like. I feel like it's something that also that Don't Look Up was criticized for, although Don't Look Up had some parts that were going against it as far as that goes, where Don't Look Up almost like was criticized for holding a mirror up to people. But what Tar does, I think, that Don't Look Up did not do, is I think Tar does a better job of like grounding you within its main character. She was like, you are with Kate Blanchett for every frame of the movie, and it is immaculately shot and edited to reflect her mindset and to place you like that. There's a lot of times in the movie where you're in very, very confined settings that almost kind of turn the movie into a completely different genre. Like that moment for me that was particularly striking, the moment where she's going into that underground tunnel cavern in order to pursue the girl, in order to give her back her teddy bear, and then also that moment where she comes out of her hotel room to meet her, but sees that she's already going out. And it's like you have that very quick her walking across, where I think they changed the frame rate just a bit in order to make it seem like more quick when it happens. I think that the moments with that are particularly great. It's one of the more psychologically grounding movies that I've ever seen. And yeah, I think that I think you summed it up perfectly and hit the nail on the head as far as that goes. It's one of my favorite movies of the year.
Well, you like it significantly more than I do, but I definitely get what Todd Field was going for. If you're talking about rewatchability, I'm definitely going to rewatch this the least of his movies, because I think his other movies like have better pacing and like more like twisty and like unsettling stories. But like this is unsettling in its own right, but it's definitely more frustrating in some respects. I think the supporting cast really gets wasted. And I know it is a character study, but for a movie like this, I feel like we need to have some more
there are a lot of points
development.
And it's funny because it's
motive.
not like it's short. If it was an hour and a half, it's like, okay, but it's 2.5 hours long. Like there's a lot of time to fill up. And I will admit, there are a couple of shots of her just chilling in her apartment. And like, while I did get a chance to show off that, like, yeah, Kate Blanchett at like 55 or 56 or however old she is, has still got it, like, looks wise. It's like, yeah, like, okay, like we don't need this scene. We don't need this scene. It's like a couple scenes that we could have gotten like some more extra context. Like famously, there's a scene at the end of the movie where a video is released of her, and it is very hastily edited together in order to make it look right, in order to make it look like she is harassing the student, when in reality the scene is shown earlier that she is simply, kind of flexing her ego a little bit and making the student feel stupid ultimately.
Touches him on the leg briefly.
Right.
But it's nothing like, are you traumatized?
Right.
Oh my God.
Well, the scene itself still stands. It's like, I felt like there could have been a little bit more put into that in order to like kind of flesh it out more, especially because there's a lot of moments that show her like kind of, again, flexing her power in order to get people pushed out.
And they leave out the part of him calling her a bitch.
Right. Well, of course, because God forbid that they show like, and any sort of morally gray area and show it in a 3-dimensional light, because this is how it goes. Every person that gets canceled is instantly a monster and not an actual human being, with flaws.
I mean, I think the point of that scene is that they both suck, because they're pretentious, and like the fact that he's that upset about it, like, just makes him just as bad as she is. like in my opinion. I just think like he's just showing everyone's gray area in this movie and like everyone's hypocrisy and like how they like shift blame to people that even if they deserve it or they don't. And
Yeah.
I don't think that the people that really love this movie really understand. Like I've seen the people that really love this movie really think it's about like how shitty she is,
Right.
and how like
And
that's and I don't think that's really the full point.
And I
it.
think that the people who are focusing on that, it's like, yeah, you're clearly not getting the right thing from this.
No, you just want to just have fun. Oh, isn't it funny that she's wallowing in with an accordion? Like, yeah,
what?
It's funny,
what does that even mean?
It's like, yeah, because that scene is funny when she's like, doing that with the accordion, but it is a great performance. And,
yeah,
people are just so like, they just love seeing miserable people get their comeuppance. And even if they don't fully deserve as harsh of a comeuppance as she does in this movie, but she's still working by the end, but it's whatever.
Just not on, anything that she would want ultimately.
No.
Yeah. I thought that part was like really funny where it's like, oh, what is she doing?
It's darkly funny. That's another thing that's consistent with Todd Field is like this movie is darkly funny at points, like genuinely funny.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah. So now
solid
moving on,
8.
Yeah, I would give this. I gave this a 4.5 because I was a big fan of this movie. It also helped. I saw this in the Alamo Draft House, and I ended up getting a free ticket for it because I got there late. It was sold out, but then some woman gave up her ticket, so it ended up being a really great experience. And I got a Royale with cheese while I was watching it, so it ended up working really great. That's a movie theater you and I have to frequent. Like I'm telling you, you can order food and drinks while you're watching the movie. It's the greatest theater ever invented. It's pretty great. So. Lastly, before we move on to our last topic of the day, we were talking about Bones and All, which is Luca Guadagnino's next movie. This is his follow-up to his 2018 film Suspiria and the 2020 miniseries that he did for HBO called, what was that show called? We Are Who We Are? Was that it? Yeah. This is a film that, again, is based off of a book that, again, concerns some rather discomforting subject matter. It is a road travel coming of age film about two young up-and-coming lovers who are, I think, still coming to terms with themselves, portrayed by Taylor Russell and Timothée Chalamet. And the thing that they are coming to terms with is the fact that they are cannibals. There are some very grisly scenes that feature them, kind of snacking down on some people. I find it interesting how it's like, despite them being portrayed as relatively innocent, they are essentially like kind of fulfilling in a strange way the same role that Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis did in Natural Born Killers, where they were essentially tracking down, isolating people and then murdering them for the purposes of quenching their hunger. But I think in order to kind of break it down, I think that the interesting thing and the reason why it's so high is because Luca is once again able to find the humanity in this ultimately really disgusting and really inhumane presentation, in that he turns it again into a great reflection of adolescence and coming of age, but not in a weird, cringe, awkward, like almost I might stretch to say pedophilic way that something like Turning Red does, where it's more so about like kind of almost creating this mythology, and it's like, okay, they're almost a part of like this underground group of people that like ultimately do not mean harm, but because of this, for lack of a better word, genetic disability that they are born with,
they're eating people.
No, but listen. But like, so kind of what I'm getting at here is like it's presented almost like in a way like as a modern day monster movie, where it's like, again, how vampires or werewolves in a modern sense would be, where they're struggling to fit into society. Where again, because the whole thing that's explained at the beginning of the movie with Taylor Russell when Andre Holland is leaving those recordings for her is that she was ultimately born with this, and it is a thing that ultimately was not controlled. But the way that they present it is that it's not something that could kind of be trained to take away, at least not at the time period in which it takes place, which I believe this takes place around the 80s or the 70s. I can't remember. And that obviously has a lot of allusions to this, has a big effect on this as well, where it's, again, this thing that can't really be treated because nobody in person really knows about it. So they're kind of, again, just locked up in mental asylums the way that Taylor Russell's mom is, portrayed by Chloe Sevigny. There's also deeper, possibly allusions about, again, there being like, again, child rejects, the fact that Chloe Sevigny was adopted because her parents abandoned her. That again, there are constantly these loose lingering threads, and they're also, I think, really well represented in Mark Rylance's character. Mark Rylance plays an older cannibal drifter who's been around for quite a while, that Taylor Russell runs into at the beginning of the film, and he kind of stalks her throughout the rest of the movie. Yeah. And like, it's so freaking disturbing, but simultaneously like watching, like the scene with Michael Stuhlbarg and David Gordon Green of all people, which was mind-boggling. Like,
He was
what was
awesome.
that? That was crazy. That is one of the craziest scenes I've seen in anything this year. Like,
I
wild
wanted more
stuff.
of that. Yeah, I wanted more of those two in this movie. They were great. But
Yeah, like,
Mark Rylance, I've seen people on Twitter be like, "So are we gonna say that? Are we gonna admit that Mark Rylance is a terrible actor?" And I'm just like, "Shut the
wait,
fuck up."
what?
Yeah, there's been people on Twitter being like, "He sucks," actually.
Oh man. Well, guess
And I'm
what?
just like, "He
I will
rules."
say I'm studying Shakespeare right now in the acting school that I'm at, and he has been in every single thing. And it's like he can make Shakespeare sound like legit. And I will say that with the exception that even though again Bridge of Spies, he kind of started off with a little bit of a bad rap in Bridge of Spies because
He's always good in that movie.
right, he is still good in the movie, even though he
Yeah.
unfortunately stole Sylvester Stallone's Oscar. But every movie
Tom
he's
Hardy's.
been in after
Mhm.
that movie, Sylvester Stallone. But every
Okay.
movie that he's been in after that movie, his performance has been great. Like, he's great. He's arguably the best part about Ready Player One. He's great in Chicago 7. He's great in what's the other ones that I'm forgetting? Oh,
Don't
my
Look
God.
Up.
Don't Look Up. He's great in Don't Look Up. Like, it's honestly kind of nuts. Almost kind of unfair how good he is. Hold on, I'm pulling up his movie on my letterbox. What's it called? Don't Look Up. Dunkirk. I even think that his little part that he has in Dunkirk is fantastic, and I think really helps to ground and humanize that movie, you know? So, but I think the work that he puts in here is stunning and might be like the best work that he's ever done so far on screen. It's kind of mind-blowing. So like Mark Rylance kind of low-key become like one of the best working actors that we have right now. What are your thoughts on the movie? Because we didn't really get a chance to talk about this movie. I think I saw it before you.
Another
but
solid movie, you know. I don't adore it. I liked it a little bit more than Call Me by Your Name.
I liked it a lot more than Call Me by Your Name, but we'll get to that.
I'm just saying because like I'd say A Bigger Splash is still probably my favorite Luca movie out of the ones I've seen. I didn't make it through all of Suspiria, but maybe I'll give
Love
that
that
another
movie.
chance.
You have to
But,
make it to the third act. You have to make it to the third act.
Yeah, I'll give it a chance.
The third act makes Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's third act look like bloodless by comparison. It's ridiculous how violent it gets. There's so much blood.
But I did enjoy it. I do think the ending is a little strange. Like the last scene of the movie was like a little strange for me, but like I definitely enjoyed it. And it was the pacing's a little strange too. It's like comes in a little over 2 hours, but it wasn't, you know, never ending in my
Right.
opinion. The performances were solid. Mark Rylance steals the show. But yeah, I don't really have that much to say about it. Some of it's like I can't look at it because it's just fucking gross,
I think the opening scene might be
good
the most
movie though.
effective opening scene of the year for me. I think personally, and this is going to come off as really surprising, even though I loved him in Call Me by Your Name, I think that this is the best work that Timothée Chalamet has ever done on screen. For me personally, I think that this was finally a character that like didn't like it played to his strengths. I think the best of all of the characters that he's played so far, and I think that it was just he just knew how to portray this, you know, the kind of this lonesome, handsome, driven, and like I finally understood. Like with this movie, like it started, I feel like with Dune last year. Call Me by Your Name, the whole thing is that was the first like big leading role that I'd seen him in, and I'll admit the Army Hammer baggage in hindsight kind of overshadows that a little bit because I'm realizing now that all the problems that I have with that movie are with him, and it's like everything that I
Yeah, and this movie's about cannibalism.
Ironically enough, like
Yeah.
what the hell are the odds of that? But yeah, it's like every movie I've seen him in, like Beautiful Boy, he's good in, but it's like I don't know. I have a problem with that movie and the repetitive nature of it. I don't.
Beautiful Boy, he's incredible in that.
Well, he's good
That's
in
my
it.
favorite.
But I'm saying
And
that like
either that or Lady Bird. He's great in Lady
Bird, he's funny in, but but again, I don't think he has enough to do in. I personally like Lucas Hedges more in that movie. What's it called? And then what's the other big one? He has, his part in Don't Look Up, but this movie, I'm really, really a big fan of his. And I'm finally starting to see, like I said, I was a big fan of him in Dune. I thought he was the perfect person to play Paul, and I can't wait to see kind of where the character arc goes from there for part 2. But yeah, this one, it's like, again, it's like I'm finally starting to see him like, okay, he's got like I see the young movie star in him now that I may not have seen before, and that was kind of the big takeaway. Taylor Russell, I'll admit this is the third thing I've seen her in now after, what was it, Escape Room and Waves. And she was in one other thing that I'm not remembering right now. But I'm still not quite sold on her yet. Like, she delivers the lines effectively, but I think she's a little bit too, like, cutesy for me. And I don't think her arc, like, she doesn't feel, like, super mature by the end, I feel like, in a way that the movie expects us to. Because, like, without spoiling anything, the third act, the last closing scene of this movie is one of the most simultaneously heartbreaking and disgusting things I've ever seen. Like, I legitimately, like, a small piece of me, like, died by the end of the movie because I was, like, really, really rooting for them to get through, which like again says a lot about the movie. But yeah, this is another 4.5 for me. This is my number 3 of the year. I love this freaking movie. I don't know what it is, but it's like
4 out of 5, 8 out of 10 again.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just the Italian in me, but yeah. So those were kind of the those are kind of the big movies. Like I said, we'll be covering the rest for the year. We're going live next week in order to cover The Whale and Pinocchio. Then obviously Avatar: The Way of Water and Glass Onion will be closing out the year. We'll also have a couple more Netflix movies before we start to discuss the road to the Oscars starting at the beginning of next year. But before we get out of here, so Dustin, already the controversy has started. It's like so far there's one every year. There's one every single year where there has to be controversy that surrounds it. It was Power of the Dog last year, and this year it already seems to be The Whale, which is again a movie that a decent amount of people have seen. Again, I think that we've both been looking forward to it. It's Brendan Fraser's big comeback vehicle. Darren Aronofsky is seeking to do kind of what he did with The Wrestler 14 years ago with Mickey Rourke. And is this movie already doomed on arrival again once it comes out? And all because of another fat suit?
Maybe.
Like
it might be.
We still can't get past this?
I think the movie itself will probably be fine. And even if it's bad, I think it should be judged on its own merit. Or lack thereof.
Which no one will do, because that's what happens every time that there is this sort of baggage.
This is what I want to say. What do they expect? Do they, like, how many A-list, B-list, even C-list 650-pound actors are there? Do they expect...
That's what they're complaining about.
Yeah, they're complaining about like how because how else would it be fat phobic? Like
right.
What would it, is it fat phobic because it's telling a story about a obese guy?
Well, like, to my understanding, based off of what I understand about the story, the whole thing is that the film is supposed to be like a portrayal of a man who is slowly physically kind of like he is almost like embellishing himself because of this tragedy that he suffered in his life. I'll spoil it out. He's gay and he lost a boyfriend of his died, and that's caused him to kind of wallow in his grief and put on this weight. And now he's to the point where he's literally about to die. And it's him like kind of coming to terms with his loved ones before he does. But to my understanding, it's that like people are angry because it's like, oh, it's about a fat person who is unhealthy. And it's like, well, yeah,
that's what I mean. Like
that's what happens when you get that morbidly obese. It becomes a health risk. Like,
yeah, it's like, is it fat?
They made a show about it. They made a show about it. It's called My 600-Pound Life or something like that. Like this is not anything new.
I thought it was called My 10,000-Pound Life.
I don't remember what it was, but the point being, it was a show that was made.
No, I think you're right. No, yeah. Mine is like obviously not realistic, but I think the controversy is basically that he wore like a fat suit.
Which still makes no sense because
it's like pretty much like the
I'll tell you about like what came to mind when I heard about this. Was that and the other thing that I was hearing too is that they thought that like Fraser's performance was being overhyped around the movie, which I thought people just didn't like the movie. Which I'm like, okay, if that's the case, then that's fine. But like that's not what I was hearing as far as the primary criticism goes.
No, everyone has said he's phenomenal.
Right,
that's not the
like,
problem.
And like he seems to be like the surefire. Like it seems pretty clear that like he's gonna win at least. Although that may be up a little. That's a different thing. That may be a little.
That's what I want to talk to you about it. But I'm not even fully sold that he's gonna get in.
Really? That he's not even gonna get nominated
yeah. And you might be like, "Oh, are you serious?" But in a month from
now, I want to hear your thoughts on this because that.
And I'll say I'm wrong if I'm wrong, but like, this is the first time Brendan Fraser has really seriously ever in his whole career gotten Oscar buzz.
Right.
Even when he was an A-lister, he never got any Oscar buzz. I mean, he was in Gods and Monsters, but he was never seriously
and he was never seriously considered for that. And that's almost something that, like, again, people have come around on, like, retrospectively. It's like, oh, maybe he should have been nominated for that.
Yeah, but he was gay in that, but he wasn't really a gay man. So, like, did he really deserve praise?
And what's funny too is how nobody's talking about that.
Oh, and he's not gay. Yeah, he's also gay in this movie, right?
Right,
so,
exactly.
Like, so he's not really 650 pounds, and he's not gay.
Right.
All right, but he's an actor, so can he just act? Okay,
also,
why?
And here's another thing that I'll say to people who criticize it for that. What are the odds that everybody who portrayed that role on stage, because this is based off of a stage play, right?
Exactly.
How many people in that part will actually wait? How many people on the stage wore fat suits?
All of them.
Yeah, exactly. That's
really the controversy. Then
that
because everyone has been vague. Like all of the letterbox
right.
blurbs that I've
I
seen
think
of
the
like
biggest
one
thing is
and a
they're
half.
waiting. They're just waiting for the movie to actually be widely released so they can pounce. You know.
But yeah, until like Twitter gets like a whole cohesive consensus of why it's offensive and why it's problematic. So
Right.
it's just fucking annoying, and like it's probably going to be a mediocre movie anyway. But like,
Oh man.
but Brendan Fraser is probably going to be amazing and awards worthy in it. You
Yeah.
know, and Hong Chow could spoil the supporting actress race as well.
That's true. That's true. That's something that I would.
But Brendan Fraser, I was saying he could get snubbed just because of the fact that he's like never been really acknowledged his whole career. This is his first time, and the Academy has never ever put him in consideration for anything. And he's mostly been his whole career comedic actor.
Right.
All right. And
Right.
what's the history with comedic actors and
They
the
get
Academy?
snubbed. They get snubbed.
What about Jim Carrey? What about Adam Sandler? I'll
Right.
tell you why. Because they have like a shallow pettiness, and exactly the article you were bringing up about that awards voter talking about Adam Sandler. Like he acknowledged, that same guy did acknowledge that he was great in Uncut Gems, but yeah, maybe next time. But he's not getting nominated for Hustle also.
Right.
But
Which
like,
is insane because that's also an incredible performance.
he's very good in it, but he's not Uncut Gems level or Jake Gyllenhaal and Nightcrawler. You know what I mean?
Right.
But Brendan Fraser, I mean, it's coming out at the right time, you know.
Right.
At December, I could be wrong that he gets snubbed, but if he does get snubbed, I'm not going to be surprised because he's a comedic actor mostly, and I never knew the Academy really gave a shit about Brendan Fraser. It's funny when they decide to give a shit about.
Well, the biggest thing now is it's the narrative around it, and the fact that it's like, yeah, it's like this is the biggest thing that they're trying to spread is it's like, okay, Brendan Fraser's an actor who's been heavily screwed over by Hollywood. You know, they have the narrative of it's like, oh, you know, he couldn't do certain roles because he hurt his back really badly, and he's been constantly denied. But like you said, it's like they're trying to spin the sympathetic card for again an actor that has simply been passed over because they thought he was a comedic actor. You know, not really like an action star. Which again, I would argue that his career didn't start that way because when he started, he was kind of going for like a lot of the similar roles that, you know, Damon and Affleck and Cole Hauser and all the other guys that were coming, Chris O'Donnell, you know, all the School Ties guys.
Until he made it big and then started doing straight comedies.
Right.
Like he was just doing straight comedies like
right.
Bedazzled, Dudley Do Right, Blast from the Past,
Looney Tunes back in action.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Journey to the Center of the Earth.
No, I'm with
3D.
you. I'm with you on that as far as that goes. You know, it's just like you said, it's interesting kind of how that goes. So that kind of brings me into one of my last two categories, some Oscar or early Oscar nominations. So like I said, I'm going to do an episode later on once we get into 2023 where we more fully break down like some of our specific nominations. I actually want and who we think are going to win. I actually want you on that episode as well. But for right now, I wanted to kind of break down with you. So it's become pretty clear like what some of the earlier nominations are going to be. Some movies that seem like some particular favorites. Everything Everywhere All at Once, Tar, The Fabelmans. Right now, it seems to be Top Gun Maverick. Right now, it seems to be like trying to figure out which of the late year blockbusters will get in. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever versus Avatar, The Way of Water. Right now, it seems like Avatar is going to be more of a favorite to get in. Elvis, obviously, things are really circulating around. But I wanted to know from you, what do you think some potential snubs, some surprises, what's a movie that you think that nobody's looking at that might get in? A couple people, I was listening to the Big Picture podcast earlier today. Nope. They were talking about that
Nope.
White Noise might be a leg, but you think Nope could be one?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe. I like it. It seems like people did love that movie, but they also ignored the fuck out of Us also.
That's true. Yeah, Us got nothing. But Us,
which
again,
was
I think,
a better movie. But.
Right. In a weird way, I think Nope has had a bigger lasting effect than Us. Like, I felt like Us kind of came and went as far as...
Which I don't even understand.
Right. Like, I agree. I don't get how that happened. But it's like Nope, I feel like maybe just because of a result of like when it was released and the fact that it had relatively no competition. Like, it opened 2 weeks after Thor. And I felt like was underseen, but I feel like it's been that one movie that when it came to streaming, like a lot of people have come to it and a lot more people like come around on it and they're starting to like understand the effects of it. So that's an interesting take, you know, but for chance like a surprise nomination for Keke Palmer, because I feel like the biggest thing about them was like she was the biggest takeaway. It's like, yeah, Keke Palmer is a star.
Yeah, but that's not even like that, like much of like an Oscar-worthy performance is or nomination-worthy performance. As much as I love her, and I've always loved her, but like, how much money did the Batman make?
I will check right now. So,
it was a hit. It was a bona fide hit, though, right?
Yeah.
Why do people like always make the argument for like Top Gun or Black Panther? But like, oh, they made so much money and it's like culture, they saved cinema. And it's like, yeah, but what about the Batman? Like, that's a great movie. And like,
I'll tell you why for that one is because the Batman in like early 22, that was when it's like, again, it's like there were still like some lingering effects from 2021. And because it came, I think it came on HBO Max like only like a month or two later. Like even though it made money, it wasn't in theaters for very long. So I think that might be why. Also, again, the runtime as well. People don't ultimately want to watch 3 hours of a movie in theaters. Okay, so the Batman off a budget of 185 to 200 million. It made money. It made 770 million. It was the first like big blockbuster of the year, But it's like, I guess because like people weren't fully sold on going back to theaters yet. And it's like it was a slow build, but it's like then you had movies like The Northman, movies like Ambulance, movies like what else am I missing? Then once Multiverse of Madness came out in order to kick off the summer, but like that I feel like one of the first most talked about movies of the year that came out before that was Kimmy, which was a straight to HBO Max drop. So, that's from an acclaimed director. So that's what I'm attributing that to. Okay. But I think next year it'll be a little bit different because next year, March, which has historically been a pretty big month for Blockbuster, at least in the last couple of years, the release dates for March for next year. Let me pull up actually my March calendar because there's a lot of big drops that are occurring next year. We've got
Scream.
What's it called? So we have Dungeons & Dragons, Creed 3, Scream 6, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and John Wick Chapter 4, all set to open in March of 2023. Those are all parts of established franchises. Those have all had relatively successful previous entries, and they are both and I would like to think that they're both all very, very much anticipated films. One is based off of a very, engaged role-playing game that has a lot of big movie stars in it. I think we're set for ultimately a pretty, just looking at some of the releases just for the first half of the year, I think we're pretty much set for a banger 2023 as well, and possibly not everything, because I think the consensus that you and I could both come to on 2022 as a whole is that, man, TV just kicked movies asses this year. Yep. Oh my God. Like my TV list, my TV and movie list have been pretty neck and neck in quality recently, but this one, like my TV list this year is blowing my movie list out of the water, like completely. Like just between the blockbusters, just some of the all the return shows that we got this year from start to finish, of varying degrees of quality, but it all just like, they felt like, wow, what huge events they did.
Your favorite show of the year was Blockbuster on Netflix.
That's a good one. That's a classic Dustin joke right there. Before we get out of here, Dustin, I just wanted to throw. We got some. This is a big week as far as movie news goes and trailers go. We got a lot of big trailers, and no less. We got 4 trailers this past week for Transformers: Rise of the Beast, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the now titled Indiana Jones 5, subtitled Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and pending. We have a trailer pending for for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, a long-awaited sequel to Into the Spider-Verse, as well as finally an announcement that Tetris, a long-awaited movie on your end starring Taron Egerton, is finally being released, coming to Apple TV+. I just wanted your thoughts on all those before we got out of here.
Transformers looks like dog shit. Guardians looks great. Guardians.
There you, sir.
It does. Guardians looks great. Indiana Jones looks bad. And Tetris, I can't wait for.
Yeah. Talk about that for 5 seconds, because that's something that like has been like the conversation that you and I have had where like I've seen that movie on your letterbox for what feels like 5 years, even though apparently it's only been 3. And it's like, and where I'm like, what Tetris? I'm like, well, what is it? I'm like, is this a movie? Like, is this another? For the longest time, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was gonna be in the vein of like an emoji movie where it's like about characters inside the game, and then you actually explain to me like what it was gonna be about. No, I'm serious. No, I'm saying that is what I thought that it was, and then you explained to me like what it was actually about, and you're like, oh, and I'm like, oh, okay, so it's this kind of a movie.
It's gonna be like The Social Network, but with Tetris, and Taron Egerton's like the main character in it, but the guy from Speed Racer who was like the villain, Roger Allam, like he's like going to be in it too. So hopefully he's awesome. It's from the director of Filth with James McAvoy.
Right, like John S. Laird, I believe, is the name of him.
Yeah, he's like one of the best James McAvoy performances. And like if it's like it's combining 2 of my favorite things, Social Network and Tetris. So I'm really excited for it.
Oh my God, that could not be a better place to end it. Again, all of those things. Again, like it just sucks that it's going directly to Apple, but at the very least, we're getting it. We'll talk up a storm once that eventually gets released. Who knows? It could potentially qualify for some Oscars next year. But Dustin, thanks once again for coming on. Thanks for joining me. It's been a blast. It's been a pleasure. I hope to have you on for many more episodes going forward into the new year, 2023. Season 4 is almost over. Going into season 5. That's right, people. Season 5. Somehow. Hard to believe it. I don't know. Like, I feel like season 5 is like the make or break for most shows. It's like once they make it past that 4th season when they've had that pretty consistent run, it's like season 5, it's like, okay, do they still have legs or are they going to start going downhill? You know, that's a trouble territory, but we're going to do our best in order to keep churning out content for you guys because I have too much fun doing this. Dustin, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Letterbox. They can follow me on Twitter, and they can go to my YouTube channel, Mr. G Movie Reviews.
Excellent. And of course, you can follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talkin TV podcast across all platforms. Be sure to subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Follow us if you're following us on Twitch. And this episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow. So be sure to tune into there if you plan on listening on the audio platforms. And for myself, Dustin, as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time. Only 3 more episodes to go before the end of 2022 and season 4.
Bye.